What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Founder Hour podcast. I'm your co-host, Pat, and on today's episode, we sat down with Jiake Liu. He's a co-founder and CEO of Outer, a new direct-to-consumer outdoor furniture company who's turning consumers' backyards into showrooms. In this episode, we chat about everything from Jake's early days growing up in China, how he got into computers and electronics, immigrating to the US in high school, his early career and various entrepreneurial ventures, what sparked the idea for Outer, and the valuable lessons he's learned throughout his journey. Here we go.
So I was born in China, in a small town in the Zhejiang province, which is a little bit south of Shanghai. And I grew up in a so my dad was an engineer, electrical engineer, and my mom has always been an entrepreneur. And so any sort of business, restaurants, boutiques, you name it, she's probably done it. Really entrepreneurial. But my dad is really scientific, engineering driven. So basically, at a very young age, I remember just creating electronic gadgets when I was like 4 or 5 years old. He would just bring back schematics and he would fix TVs for our relatives and friends, and I would help him with the soldering iron, and so I remember that as a very, very young kid. And I left my hometown. It's a very small place, to Shenzhen, which is one of the largest cities in China, and the fastest growing city in human history, apparently. Most people know about it, due to all the hardware, manufacturing and all of that from Shenzhen. So I basically went through elementary school in Shenzhen, and in 2002, I think it was the year after 9/11, I immigrated with my parents to the US. So basically, going to a little town called Huntsville, Alabama, because my dad's in aerospace. And so, so we immigrated there, and I pretty much grew up in the South, in Huntsville. Got a computer engineering degree, and thinking that I was going to work for NASA, and because that's most of my alums go to after graduating from the engineering school. And but instead of doing that, I had the opportunity to work at a video game company here in Santa Monica, Riot Games. That was my first job. And so,
Jake, before we get into your experience, here in the United States, I'm a lot more curious about your time in China and what you remember and what that was like. What sort of impact did that have? I mean, as an elementary school kid, you probably remember a lot of things. I mean, I remember a lot of things from those years. What was it like out there? I've never been. I really would love to go one day, especially like once all this mess is over. I would love to visit China, Japan, and a lot of places in the Middle East. I've been wanting to travel my whole life. But tell me a little bit about it. Tell us a little bit about that time.
Yeah, so I guess most of my memories, like you said, in elementary school in Shenzhen. So Shenzhen, I think we moved there in 1996. And for those of you who don't know Shenzhen, even in late 80s, it was like a fishing village. But in 1996, it had, 18 lane, roads and skyscrapers and like a lot of European cars. I remember, going there. I mean, from my small town to, hometown to Shenzhen, it was almost like from Huntsville to LA, right? Like the juxtaposition is pretty big. Probably even more so. Huntsville is actually quite a modern city, I would say. So in Shenzhen, it was an interesting time because it was like in the middle of the building up of the city. And so all the infrastructure, all the buildings going up, is the tallest building in China at the time. My dad worked at kind of like a resort. He's like head of engineering over there. So basically built like all the, I guess, like IT system, like electric systems for the entire, like it's a huge hotel. And so, it was fascinating because that resort actually, because Shenzhen borders Hong Kong, there are a lot of celebrities from Hong Kong and, from all over Asia that would just come to Shenzhen and stay at the resort. And, it was just like seeing that level of prosperity, in Shenzhen at a time where China was actually pretty poor as a country. It was on the rise, but it's definitely nowhere close to where it is today. That was definitely eye opening for me.
You mentioned that's where like a lot of the manufacturing is done, or I guess that was part of the reason of the growth. Is that where like Foxconn and all these companies are? Is it? Yeah.
You got it. Yeah. So Foxconn literally has like entire village in Shenzhen, and like all the workers just live in there. I think it's like hundreds of thousands of people. It's like a city within a city. It's crazy. I've never been there myself. I think Foxconn. I left Shenzhen in 2002. I think they started building like a few years after that. But yeah, Foxconn is definitely one of the largest employees in Shenzhen, if I remember correctly.
I'm not sure if you mentioned it, but I know your dad was very scientific and he was an engineer. And I know you eventually ended up doing that, sort of too in school, but did you have an idea of what you wanted to be when you were a kid, in China? Did you have like this vision for, what your life would look like, or were you not certain like most kids?
I guess I think from a very young age, again, like I just remember like all the electronics and soldering iron, and I remember having the Atari when I was a very young age. I mean, like it's unheard of in China, right? Like having my first computer, first PC in 1996, while an internet in 1997. That's pretty, I would say, forward in China specifically. So I remember all my elementary school, classmates would come to my house because I have the computer and no one else has it, right? Like I'm the one kid out of the entire class that has a PC. It was like a 386 or whatever. And so from a very young age, I was influenced by that. I think part of that is because of my dad's background, right? He actually went to kind of like the MIT of China. It's called Zhejiang University. And so he's a very talented engineer. And so from a very young age, I was influenced by that. So I guess I always wanted to be a scientist. I didn't know what that meant as a little kid, but I definitely really enjoyed the science and the engineering and behind the Atari, the computer, the toys that so I guess from a very young age I knew that I want to be an engineer.
Jake, what was it like when your parents decided that they're coming to America? You're moving from this country that you've grown up in and gone to school in and have friends in, to an entirely new place that you
Yeah.
don't know much about. What was that like?
Yeah. So my dad actually came to the States first. And then it was 2 years of just me and my mom trying to get our visa. I remember going to the embassy in Shanghai 4 or 5 times. It was, rejection after rejection. And finally we got it. And so there was a 2 year time period where I thought it was a pipe dream, right? Like, as a little kid growing up in China, obviously I watched Hollywood films because it's huge in China and anywhere in the world. So I always had this vision of what America is, even as a little kid, right? And so when we finally got the visa, and I remember flying from China and then landed in Huntsville. Actually, I flew by. I think it was like Chicago here first, and then and then transferred to Huntsville. Chicago, was just from like landing and seeing the building and architecture. It looks close to the America in my vision, right? And so, but when we landed in Huntsville, or actually before landing, I think it was at night. Distinctly remember. Um, it was like pitch black outside. There's no light, and I mean, Huntsville is a smaller city. I think it's like 80,000, 90,000 people or something like that. But at night it's just quite dark, right? It's like nowhere close to America, kind of what I imagine it could be. And so I think that was quite the shock. And then going to school in Huntsville, as I think I'm the only Chinese kid in class, one of the handful of few Asian kids in class. That was also quite the difference that I wasn't really expecting. I remember having this little, and this was before the smartphone era, obviously, 2002, right? So like I had this
How
little
old were you?
13, 12 or 13. Yeah, 13. Um, and it was seventh grade. Um, and
And that's a tough age in general, and I can imagine for you, coming from China to this sort of foreign country, not really knowing anybody or how things even work, like what the culture is like here and that kind of stuff. Was it difficult to even get acclimated and make friends and sort of feel like you fit into the system of whatever it was, the school system or just in general?
yeah, that's a really good question. I think the language barrier was definitely real. Um, But I think like 13 years, I was still at the age where I could, get used to a new environment relatively quickly. I think that's much harder for like kids who are, for example, in high school, right? Like 16 years old and, more than that. And language wise, I remember um, I learned it from somewhere that like before 14, after 14, you can develop your accent, and it's really hard to get rid of your mother tone and accents. But before 14, you can still do that. And so I think in the beginning, just besides the language, I would just say, oh, and by the way, I learned English in Shenzhen because it borders Hong Kong. So like from first grade, I was learning English, but it's like British English. So I had like this really thick British accent in the middle of Alabama, right, as a Chinese kid, and so that was quite, I think, thinking back, quite funny. I was used terms and like pronounce them differently. So I guess that was a little bit harder, I guess, for my classmates to get used to too, because they don't see a lot of people like me, I guess, coming from another country. But no, I think the memory for that period was pretty fond. Overall, it was positive. Yeah, I just remember the language being the only thing that took me maybe like 2 years to get used to. Yeah,
I can make an assumption that, like, me and Pat, we've had immigrant parents, and or have immigrant parents, and education is always a big part, right? You got to go to school. You got to become a lawyer, a doctor, an engineer. You have to go to school.
yeah.
Was that the case for you? And is that something that you were okay with? And how did your educational and academic career uh, come about?
Yeah, I mean, my parents have. I think they are more liberal as far as parents go, especially as Chinese parents go.
Right,
Obviously, they want me to get a good education, and studying is important. But they didn't, really say like, "Hey, you have to become an engineer or a doctor or a lawyer, whatever." Like that. That wasn't the case for me.
right,
So I think I count my blessings for that because there wasn't kind of like a set path for me. They were more encouraging to basically allow me to explore what I want to do. Like for example, I was a saxophonist in middle school, and my dad supported that right away, and I even could have become a musician. I think and so they would probably be supportive as well. So I think I'm very fortunate to have parents like them. But to answer your question, I think I knew what I wanted to become, right? Like engineer. And so the first opportunity I had, even in high school, I mean, even middle school, I really like science class, and in high school, I started learning how to code, HTML, and all that. And so in college, it was pretty obvious to me that I just got to get a degree in computer science or computer engineering. And so because of my childhood's experience with electronics, right, I picked computer engineering instead because I got to play with hardware. I got to play with, like circuit board designs and actually designing robots and physical tangible goods instead of just purely software. And so I
right.
eventually just picked computer engineering as my major.
Mm. And when you were in college, was that I'm assuming was that the mid 2000s?
2008. Yeah, that was my freshman
2008.
year. Hmm.
So that was kind. I'm trying to like picture what the world looked like in 2008 in terms of just like computers and technology and all this stuff. And that was kind of like right before the social media wave and internet was the e-commerce wave had come about, but it was like getting larger and larger. So what did you have like an idea of like after college what you would end up doing or where you would end up working and what you wanted to do?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, like I said, I went to the University of Alabama in Huntsville, and it's a very much an engineering college, unlike the UA, which is a football school, right? We are all just like engineering nerds, and everybody knew that upon graduation, we would work for either NASA, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, or Raytheon. It's like, or there's a telecom actually locally called Atran, where I got my first real job, I guess, like as an intern. Um, so it was either one of those companies. I really wanted to work for NASA because aerospace is just something that fascinates me as a little kid, and so I even had like a little summer program where I would go to the Space and Rocket Center. I think a lot of people may know this movie Space Camp. It's actually filmed in Huntsville. Literally, it's a museum for for aerospace. So it's where the Saturn V rocket is designed, and you have like a replica of Saturn V actually by the highway where I drive by every day when I go to college. So that's where I hoped to work for, until I had this opportunity. Growing up, I was a huge gamer. I think it's one of the more like main motivations to get into computer engineering too, because I wanted to design video games as a on my wish list of jobs, but never knew
Jake,
that was yeah.
just to talk about that a little bit, how did you even know that that was a career that you could pursue? I mean, frankly, again, I'm speaking from experience. I didn't even know video game engineering was a career, right? And I might be the only one, but was that? I mean, I know now. I didn't know back then, but is that something that you were exposed to growing up? Did you know people that went on to design video games?
Not necessarily as a profession. I knew that engineers in general, like software, engineers are needed in video game companies. I obviously didn't pursue it like a video game engineer kind of path, but I just knew that I needed to understand software. I needed to become a really good coder and programmer. That's all I knew. But it was more of just seeing companies like Valve, Blizzard, and then like Riot. Right, Riot was actually, I think, in 2009, that's when I first heard about them, when League of Legends beta came out and all of that. So, yeah, I mean, I didn't know it could be a career, but I wanted to find my way there as a potential path.
Did you have any inclination that, or like desire perhaps to be an entrepreneur, to eventually like start your own business, or was that something that came more later in your life?
Yeah, again, my mom, has always been an entrepreneur. So like, as far as I can remember, she's always running her own businesses, real estate, jewelry, boutique, anything, she's just, very entrepreneurial. And so like, I guess that's in my blood as well. The one half is probably engineer and the other half is probably entrepreneurial. And so, in the earliest memory I can remember is probably in high school. I would just buy and sell computer parts. I would build computers, again, video game, right? And then the first business I had built in high school was an IT business. I would, my mom at the time owned a restaurant. I would install this security surveillance system for her, and it turns out that many other restaurants needed something similar, right? Oh, and it was because like it was around 2007. It was like the year after iPhone came out. Android was the first smartphone to hit the market. And so I actually programmed this Linux system that allows people to remotely monitor their camera system. I would just go to Costco and buy this like $400 set. It's like a closed circuit camera system. I would hook it up to a Linux server in the kitchen and then set it up, and then I stream it to like a web server, and then you can use your Android phone to browse and see the video feed in real time. This was before Dropcam, right? And so now obviously it's like live streaming cameras, like IP cameras, so common, but back then it wasn't. So like I would sell that system for like $5,000. It was a good markup, and I would just go and install it, and I'll hire like 2 people to go with me. And so that was actually my first like real business. I actually made quite a bit of cash, as a high schooler and as a college student as well. But that would be my first kind of like business that I had built.
You mentioned interning at Riot Games. We actually had the founder, Mark Merrill, on the show. He's a good friend, and we've had him on the show actually 2 times. One of the few guests that we've had on twice.
Nice.
And it's a phenomenal company. I'm just kind of curious, as like a sort of first, second job out of college, what kind of stuff were you exposed to there early on, and what sort of came after that?
Yeah. So I think, again, I first heard about League of Legends when I was in college, and I think I was working at the college help desk at the time, so helping teachers and students fix their computers, right? But in between jobs, we would just play League of Legends in beta, and it was like nonstop, right? Like the everyone in the room was playing that game, and so when I saw that they're hiring for intern for summer, I knew I had to apply for it, but I didn't really have high hopes because, like, I'm sure they have a lot of great talent in LA, and why would they hire a kid from Huntsville, Alabama? But I tried anyway because I touted my Mandarin skill. So I spoke Chinese, and they were at the time working closely with Tencent. And basically we're about to launch in China. I think this was the end of 2011. Summer of 2011 when I actually then got the internship offer. And I think they only had like about 200 people at the time. Now they have thousands, right? It was pretty early on. So even though I was an intern, I got to work on multiple projects, obviously working closely with Tencent to help with coordination with releasing in China. QA, did a lot of coordination, production stuff, working with artists, and you name it. I mean, just like, I think Riot had a really good culture where the interns are not just there to sit around or make coffee, right? Like you actually had to do real jobs, and you actually made a really big impact at the company. And I think that was a really good thing to take away from because now even at Outer, when we hire interns, we don't ask interns to do anything that I haven't done myself as a CEO, right? And so that was important. Another takeaway from Riot is that just the culture. I mean, it's amazing, the kind of culture that they built at Riot, and that's something that I took to heart. A lot of, for example, one thing that I that took away, for me that's part of Outer's culture today is that we're treating everybody not as family but as a team. That's important because you need to hold each other accountable. It doesn't mean that you don't love each other because family relationship is like unconditional love, but you don't really have a choice. But in a team setting, in a sports team or even in like a war, right? Like you sometimes develop bonds that are even stronger, and so that was something that I took away with me as well. And so
I love that because, and we always talk about it too. It's like sometimes, when you get too much into the whole family thing, it becomes very cult-like. And, there's a lot of like just groupthink and people don't want to speak up and
That's right.
like you said, hold each other accountable. And it hurts more than it helps anything, right? It's like, oh, just because you're part of the quote unquote family, like it's like you could do anything and it doesn't matter what it is, you'll always be part of the family. And it's like this like sort of culty mentality that I don't think necessarily works well for effective companies.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, for a sports team, you're in it for one reason, which is win the championship, right? And then you're losing and winning together as a team. And so I love that. So that's something that really instilled in me, and just working a few months at Riot. It was amazing. It was amazing.
Did you want to get a job at Riot after?
Yeah, I did get an offer, thankfully, and I still have the offer letter today. And obviously, you guys know at the time I was offered some options too, and looking back, that was worth quite a bit of money. But I think when I graduated in 2012, it was either working at a Riot or embarking something on my own. And another thing that I really enjoyed while being in Santa Monica was getting to know the startup community. So all the startup founders and accelerators, incubators, and investors, I got to meet them and got to know some of them.
Who were some of those players? Who were some of those players?
So at the time, 2012 was the interesting year because there were a lot of incubators and accelerators popping up. A few of them remain today, but at the time, I got to know the folks at Amplify, who is definitely still around today. And then, at the time, it was Launchpad LA, Amplify, Mucker, Science, Idea Lab.
What were you doing? Like going like hackathons or like networking events, or how like was this something that you were just sort of putting yourself out there and meeting them, or?
Yeah,
how
I mean,
did that happen?
Yeah, so I was reading up on Paul Graham's essays. Paul Graham's the founder of Y Combinator, and I just found that to be really fascinating. Like just learning more about the startup culture and how to start companies. And so when there's like a pitch event or there's like a hackathon, whatever, I would always go attend, not to pitch, just to like watch other entrepreneurs. I still remember like Michael Dubin, the founder of Dollar Shave Club, pitching on stage to like, panel of angel investors. I wish I would have angel invested then, right? So that was a huge influence. And so, just to get to know and network, just to go to those events as much as possible.
That's awesome. And, the reason I ask is because there's a lot of people that listen and the story you're telling is it's not much. I mean, it's not too long ago, right? It was only 8 years ago that you were doing that. And there's a lot of our listeners that are interested in the startup scene, that are interested in tech and just other things in general. I think the key takeaway there is get yourself immersed in that culture, right? If it's tech, get to know who the angel investors are, get to know who the venture capitalists are, who the new companies are popping out, right? Like just be a part of that, right? No one's saying you have an idea. Just be a part of it, meet people. I'm guaranteeing you there's going to be somebody else just like you. Maybe you find your co-founder, right? So it's a great lesson. Obviously, that's paid dividends for you.
And obviously, like, places like LA and San Francisco and New York and these sort of bigger hubs have larger communities and more resources, but you'll find small niche communities in other areas as well. And if you can't, then it's a good idea to maybe even start one yourself. And I'm sure there's like a lot of people these days, especially in 2020, that, I mean, technology is everywhere. Every company has to be a tech company to survive.
Right.
So yeah. Anyways, sorry.
No, you're good. So what did you do? You turned down Riot. You're living in Santa Monica or in Santa Monica in general, and you clearly want to be an entrepreneur. Did you just immediately start a company after college?
So I definitely have a confession. At Riot, I did have an offer, but it was not the offer that I wanted. I wanted something that's more. So what happened was that they offered me, I think it was like a QA job or something, right out of college. But at the time, I already had a few years of engineering experience. I also had another offer from a telecommunications company as an engineer. And so to me, I was like, no, you guys need to hire me as an engineer. I'm not going to take a QA, position. And so at the time, I remember the hiring manager who, then we became friends later. He told me that, I had this toxic culture that's not acceptable at Riot because there's too much ego, right? I think as a kid coming out of, school, I think I've built my own business, right? I had an engineering job offer and like I had worked at Riot. I thought I was a big deal, right? Like it was, I haven't really failed in my life yet. I really had like this ego. I think that was really important, so I turned it down because I didn't want to just be a QA person.
Do you agree with him though, looking back?
Looking back, I totally agree. Yes. Yeah. But, at the time, I mean, but then again, looking back, if I had worked at Riot or any company for that matter, right, even the special places of Riot Games, I don't think I would have worked there for longer than maybe 2 years, just because I was restless, right? I wanted to create something. That's what I wanted to do. I would be a really terrible employee anywhere, I feel. So maybe it's all moot, right? Like I definitely would just start my own business one day anyway. So I think at the time, the hiring manager, I think the HR person, he told me like, have you considered that maybe you're a little bit too entrepreneurial? And I didn't understand it at the time, what that meant. And that just meant like I wasn't good at following orders. So
talk about that, and I'm curious because, like we've a lot of folks who are entrepreneurial have been in that position before, and I feel like there's like two different types of people. Like there are ones that sort of internalize it, where it's like you just get frustrated, but you don't actually externalize it to the point where you're risking your job or getting fired, but it's like this burning thing inside of you where you just sort of forces you on this path to eventually like leave and start something. And then there are those folks who actually externalize it and are very vocal and are always just sort of, wreaking havoc like in the workplace. And, and those people tend to get fired perhaps because they don't sort of follow the rules or aren't part of this quote unquote, like sort of team and culture. So how would you describe yourself in those scenarios?
I don't think I was disruptive. I think I built a really good relationship with everybody that I work with. I enjoy building relationships, and I'm just curious, in general. So like, I am curious in humans in general. So like, I love meeting new people, and I tend to get along with anybody pretty well. And so I don't think I'm the latter. Like I think I would have fitted in fine, and I believe I would have contributed really well. But it was more. I think I was more entitled. As a like a college kid. I thought I deserved, better pay and a better job title. I think they even gave me at one point like a junior producer title. I was like, no, let's drop the junior. I mean, like just thinking back, it was so cringy, like I was like 21-year-old.
What would you do now if somebody you were hiring somebody and they did to you what you did to Riot?
I see that all the time. I mean, it's good to have ambition. We even at Outer, we definitely look for people who want to become, entrepreneur because, we're a startup. And so we want people who are scrappy, who are thinking outside the box and who have the drive and initiative. But I do think it's important to balance that with like humbleness, right? I think that was another core piece of culture that I took away from Riot is just how humble everyone is. Like, doesn't matter how accomplished you are. Some of the founding members of Riot, they're just the most humble people that you know. One of them
Yeah.
actually later became one of my investors. So I think that's also important to balance. But I do think that's kind of like rough around edges for a lot of new college grads. So I don't necessarily take that as a completely red flag, but I would try to kind of like cultivate that, and maybe like
Right.
navigate that a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's important, like, you said to sort of humble yourself in these scenarios, especially if you're like a new college student. But at the same time, you know your worth, and it's
Right.
good to set the expectation ahead of time. Like, I am ambitious, like I want that job, and even if it's not that first position, like how can we set myself up for that to get that position as soon as possible? Like, are there certain performance metrics or certain things that I need to hit, and like in 6 months, let's reevaluate. Like, that's all stuff that you should communicate. And for those who are listening who are in that position, I think it's important to show that you are ambitious, but at the same time, it's like to come out of college to get like a high level position. Sometimes it's not the easiest thing.
Agreed. I think what really left a huge impression on me is that hey Jake, basically hiring manager said we won't give you the producer position that you're looking for. In fact, we're not going to hire you at all. If you just insist on this. And then they say you just need to fail more. We'll talk. In a few years. So that was
So,
true.
so,
And so
so, what, so what did you do? Did you go on and fail more, or did you go on to find another job? What did you do?
plenty of failures for sure. And so, but at the time I knew I wanted to start my own company. Right. And so, I moved out to LA because I did get so at the same time I was building an app on the side as well, for my mom's restaurant. It was for, taking customer reviews. It was when Yelp was just like, whoa, sorry. I just completely knocked my computer off the desk. All right. Okay. At the time I was also building an app for my mom's, restaurant. At the time, Yelp was on the rise, and restaurateurs were kind of losing control over their reputation because the loudest customers win, right? Like it's all about serving the super customers. And so I was building an app to help her kind of get customer review and feedback, and actually help her manage the Yelp reviews better. It was called Servly, and so she used the software. She loved it. She recommended it to other restaurateurs in around Huntsville, and everybody loved it. And so I started seeing the value in that, and we got invited by actually by Amplify. So Jeff Solomon was the partner at the time, and he.
You had him on the show.
Oh, you did? No kidding. That's cool. I'm gonna look up the episode. Love Jeff, and so he was the one that said, hey, come out to LA, build this. We'll fund you for a few months, and let's see, if you can build this into like a venture backable business. So I did, packed up everything into my little car and drove across the country at the time with my co-founder, Joel, who I convinced to drop out of college to do this. I just told him, hey, it's just gonna be 3 months. If it doesn't work out, you can always go back and resume your sophomore CS degree. And I wrote him a $5,000 check as well. I said, if it doesn't work out, you can just cash this. Like that's you can just do this. And that convinced him to drive out. It was me and him drove maybe like 3 days from Huntsville to LA, found an apartment in Mar Vista, and went to Amplify. But at the same time, I was also meeting up with the founder of Mucker, so Will, and then also someone introduced me to Sam Teller over at Launchpad LA. And eventually we decided to join, despite Jeff's recruitment, and there was a reason for us to move out to LA. We actually ended up deciding to join Launchpad, because at the time they incubated a restaurant tech company called Chow Now. Chris Webb is the founder, who convinced me that Launchpad is actually the right home for Servly, right? And so, gave Jeff advisor shares just to thank him for the impetus to drive out here. But then we joined Launchpad and quickly just got to work. I mean, it was 3 months of just intensive work. It's kind of like the YC style. You just got to show week over week growth. You got to talk to customers. I remember like talking to all the restaurants in Santa Monica door to door. I can tell you that the best way to sell to a restaurateur is to walk through the back door, through the kitchen, because the front, the front desk person is going to turn you away. They're trained to do so, right? But if you go to the kitchen, the chef or the kitchen staff will let you know where the owner is, and so you can sell software, whatever you want to sell, that way. Um,
Good
that was
tip.
important.
Just walk into the
Walk through the kitchen.
Talk about a backdoor strategy. I love it.
quite literally, yes. Um, and yeah, I mean, that's when Launchpad. Thinking back, it was super valuable. I mean, how else are you going to build a great network of founders and investors and allies and partners as a kid
Start a
from
podcast.
Alabama? I'm sorry. Start a podcast.
Start a
Okay.
podcast. Yeah,
That's probably podcast was actually pretty getting popular too around 2012. I remember.
Start a podcast called the Founder Hour. I mean, just steal our idea, right? That's how you do it.
Either join Accelerator or start a podcast.
Yeah, there you go.
Nice.
But so talk to us, Jake. I mean, you join Launchpad LA. Your buddy drops out of college. You guys come to LA. How does it go? I know you ran it for a few years, but talk to us about the growth and the challenges, and ultimately what happened with Servly.
So I remember the first thing that Will Su over at Mucker told me was that, hey, I really like you, but unless you're ready to sink 10 years of your life into this, I would advise you from like leaving the SMB, small businesses industry. It's so hard. So Will actually came from YP, Yellow Pages. They basically sell to small business all the time ever since the literal yellow book, like the Yellow Pages book.
Yep.
And that definitely resonated through the entire journey of building that first company. It's one of the hardest things, even to this day. Like after building multiple businesses, I still think selling to small businesses is one of the hardest things in the world. It's just so hard to scale, right? Like it's so hard to get their attention. I still think it's uncracked nut. I don't think anybody has solved for that. And so it was a good experience to kind of like cut my teeth into, basically build resiliency, to have grit in building a company and just facing a lot of failures and, just getting turned down by restaurateurs and, shop owners all the time. It was really difficult. And so, the business had like marginal success. It was SaaS business. So like we had maybe like built it to, I don't know, like $500,000, $1 million in run rate. And then I had a founder of Dispute right after we closed a round of funding from Crosscut Ventures. And some really prolific angel investors in town, like Brian Lee, Jason Nazar, Nick Green, etc. We had the who's of the angel investors, thanks to what we learned from Launchpad and the connections that we built there. 2 months after the money hit the bank, my two co-founders came to me and they wanted to fire me because they said, hey, your job is done here. You raised the money and you can, we don't see any value in you in the company anymore. We want to keep building the company with the money that you just raised. So that was definitely a huge shocker. It quite literally felt like somebody stabbed me in the back, right? Because those are two of my most trusted people who left Huntsville. They both went to the same school. They're both engineers. Another lesson, right? Like overlapping skill sets. And it just didn't work out. And so it was a very dark moment. I mean, it was an impasse. They wanted to fire me. I wanted to stay on. My investors backed me, but the investors invested on a note, so they didn't really have any legal recourse. They wanted to take the company and run with it. They had hired another BD person who wanted to become the new CEO. And so there was a lot of politics and dynamics at a very, very small company. It was like 11 people, right? I had to lay off everybody, pause all payroll, froze my own payroll, obviously, just to try to figure out that entire mess. Yeah, I mean, it was probably still to this day, it's probably the one of the toughest failures or like moments in my entrepreneurial journey. It was that founder fallout, that dispute that I was going through.
Was that something that you think could have been avoided at all? Like, or were there other sort of factors at play that were just sort of out of your control?
Definitely. I mean, I was just a very inexperienced CEO. First of all, in retrospect, we had split the company in three. It was equal ownership with the three co-founders. That was mistake number one. And literally, I just stepped up and say, hey, I'll be the CEO. I'll go and learn to fundraise and be the business guy, even though we all coded, right? Like we all built the software. And so fundraising was very difficult because that was the first time, for me to do it. And so like I would set a wrong expectation for my partners. I would say, hey, I'll get it done in 2 months or like a month, whatever, right? Ended up taking like 6 months. And so you can imagine after month two, I'm telling them, hey, it's gonna get done like next week. Repeat that, 5, 10 times, they've lost trust in me, right? They think that I'm not capable of fundraising. And so, but obviously, people know that it's well, now I know it's a lot harder than that. It's not, it's not just the way that you pitch. Sometimes it's about the market, sometimes about the process, right? And so it's about the people that you talk to. And so I really didn't have that expectation or knowledge to kind of handle that well. And so the way that I handled it, which is wrong, is to tell my co-founders and my team to, just it's going to get done soon. But I wouldn't tell them, the difficulties and negativity that I'm going through, because at the time I thought I was shielding them from the negativity from the fundraise so they can focus on the business, because business was actually doing pretty well at the time, right? And so that was a mistake. Mistake number two is to not be very transparent to my partners. And they actually took that as a, are you trying to hide something from us? Why are you not communicating with us, right? So my rationale at the time was that as long as I get the money in the bank, everything else can be solved, right? Including cultural differences and like the team and all of that. I cannot be more wrong. I think most businesses fail because of team fallout, like people just give up on it, or like the partnership fallout. Number two is then running out of money, right? So we could have just kept on like we didn't have a lot of money. We had like $50,000, $100,000 total from Launchpad that lasted us like over a year, right? With the 3 people on the team. And I was assuming that as soon as I close my $1 million round, I can solve all the issues in the world, including this, brewing tension between my partners. But what happened was that, 2 months after the money hit the bank, it was just kind of hard to turn back. I mean, the air was just very toxic, and it was difficult. It was negative. It was hard to remedy. I didn't know how to remedy it. With my co-founders, even though we had the money, it wasn't something that the money can solve for. And so, yeah. So knowing what I know now, I would have definitely had a better idea to how to manage expectations and communicate with my partners and share the the stress and the negativity and all the no's from fundraising, and just to, because that's what matters in a partnership, right? The partners need to feel that they're respected and trusted. And so yeah, so it's, from their perspective, they've never done it themselves. They don't know how hard it is to fundraise. They think it's like building a project where there's a definite scope and it's all up to your capability, whether you can code it or you can't, right? And then you have a deliverable. That's not how fundraising
and unless you've done it before, I mean, it is a brand new frontier for almost every entrepreneur who is going off on this endeavor, and it's something that you have to just sort of learn by doing. So there has to be that sort of tolerance there too. It's like it's gonna be hard to start off as, if you're like an engineer, hire a really experienced CEO from day one who knows how to do all this stuff. I mean, you almost have to do it yourself. So it sounds like what you're sort of saying is like you would have sort of maybe tried to find the right partners who complement your skills, while meanwhile learning how to go out there and be a CEO and raise money.
Totally. And sympathy and empathy, right? Because they didn't really have that for me, right? Because they thought, it's easy to fundraise, or it's a finite thing. But they've never done it themselves, right? So I do think just stepping someone else's shoes and just try to understand from their perspective, it's not for the lack of trying or effort, right? It's really just it's difficult. It's not something that you can control. I mean, that happens a lot in like sales and BD and positions like that, where you rely on not just your own skill, but a lot of timing and some luck and the other person on the other side, right? I think that's important to know, I think, for any kind of business. So yeah, I mean, it was just, go ahead.
What came after all this? I mean, obviously it's a challenging time. You've been working day and night to try to get this company up and running, and obviously you're dealing with all this like strife, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you're an entrepreneur at heart. I mean, you're always going to be hustling. You're always, just hungry, right? I could just tell that's the type of person you are. That's the type of, environment that you want to be in. That's where you do best. What did you do? I mean, did you just kind of sit on the couch and just fucking cry and, just go down on yourself? Or did you just, pick right back up, or was it a combination of both? I mean, what was that time like?
I might have done the couch thing maybe for a day or two. um, no, yeah, it was really difficult. I think I fell into depression, for a bit. It was really hard to reconcile, and it was an impasse, right? I had a lot of pressure from my investors. Not that they were, being like pressuring me, but I just felt this obligation to solve this because it was a problem that I'm the CEO, so like I'm responsible for accountable for all of this. And so what happened was actually, again, I had to lay off everybody. It was impasse between the two other co-founders and me. The investors, trusted in my ability to turn the company around. I was investor in the business too. I put all my savings in the company, so I basically gave them an opportunity for the two co-founders to say, okay, convince all investors that you can actually, run with the business, and maybe I will just step aside and let you guys do it. They weren't able to do it. Again, they didn't have a lot of experience on the business side, right? And so the investors actually had trust in me. So they basically said, hey, if Jake is willing to keep going with his business, even if it's just down to him, we will leave the money in the bank and let him kind of, build business. But if it's you guys, then, we're out. Like, give us the money back. And so, there's a lot of trust, from my investors by saying that. But I think the whole thing happened right before Thanksgiving in 2015. I think it was November 2015. And it took us 6 months to resolve it. And the resolution was that my two co-founders left. We bought them out, and the investors remained on board. I think short of like two investors that actually allowed them to, we gave them an opportunity to back out. Right? Obviously, it was only 2 months after they invested that this whole thing happened. Obviously, they had a right to take the money back. At least that's what I believed in. And so most investors, including Crosscut, Nick Green, all of these guys just remain a staunch supporter. They say, hey, I believe you will find a way. So I was in my pajamas. Remember, I was working from home all the time. I didn't have an office, but I was working hard. I was trying to say, like, okay, I had to learn and relearn the code base. I had to like take over all the customer relationships. Thankfully, I had all the relationships. Right, that was my job. And just to kind of work from my own bedroom for a little bit. Like, it took, I think, a few more months until I ran into a new advisor. Vince Thompson is his name. He's an LP in Crosscut. That's how we got to meet each other. He just joined me as kind of like a new co-founder, interim business partner. And we would just hit the streets and just relaunch the product. And we, pivoted a little bit. And then I met my new co-founder, Robin, at the time, who actually worked at Riot Games. That's how we got to meet each other, but we didn't really keep in touch until I ran into him when he was working at TriNet Cloud. We were in the same building. I run into him all the time and say, "Hey, what are you up to nowadays?" And we got to know each other. And he wanted to build a company, and he didn't know how to get started. I needed a CTO that to help me, build the tech so I can focus on the business side. So I hired him on as consultant. Saying like, "Hey, you know what? You can probably do a consulting for us, be our interim CTO, and I'll help you figure out how to launch your own product, your own company and startup." That evolved into a co-foundership, right? So he joined me as a new co-founder at the company called ProspectWise. Now we renamed the company and pivoted it, which still serving the small business world, and turn the company around. Thankfully, thanks to Vince, thanks to Robin, thanks to the new team and all the investors, Brian Garrett over Crosscut, they were just like super supportive during the entire time. Nick Green over at Thrive Market, helping me navigate, this whole mess and turn the business around. And so today, ProspectWise is profitable. It's growing. I'm still on the board. I'm no longer involved operationally, but it was I wouldn't say a happy ending because it's still going. But I think the investors are all at least going to get their money back, if not more. So I'm glad that that's what happened.
So let's talk about Outer. This now, like you're sort of, I think it was like around 2000, late 2017. You start Outer. How did the whole idea come about, and was it something that was sort of brewing in your head for a while, like as you were at ProspectWise, or did it sort of come, serendipitously? Like how did it all happen?
It was serendipity for sure. By the summer of 2016, I was kind of burned out. I mean, having gone through all of that with ProspectWise, I was kind of burned out. And so, again, thanks to my investor, Brian Garrett. He said, hey, you know what? Just try to figure out, what do you want to do next? Like, I don't care, like even if ProsperWise didn't exist today, I'm not going to hold you to it. Like, we'll probably just back you for your next company. Which is a lot to, like they put in, quite a bit of money into ProsperWise. And, he was actually, was able to say that to me. I actually just took a trip to China, just to take some time off from the business. And I have this cousin, his name's Jack. From very early on, he was telling me about this furniture business that he has, a factory in Zhejiang, China. And he has been doing really well selling patio furniture to like Home Depot and Pottery Barn, Costco, etc. And he told me to come visit the factory. I didn't really take that seriously. I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll just go take a look. It's interesting. But when I visited, I just kind of fell in love because for the longest time I was working in software. I didn't get to touch, see, or feel my product. For the first time, I'm seeing all of these great, beautiful furniture being made in person, and like the operation, just something about the air in the factory that was really just energizing, and it was really hot. Also, maybe that's part of the reason. In the factory, but I really just, it was kind of like love at first sight, and I was like, okay, how do I get involved here? There must be an opportunity here. To his point, so I came back to LA over a weekend. I rented a warehouse in City of Industry. I logged on to Flexport, created an account, figured out how to import from China. I I got on Shopify, spun up a site, using Photoshop. I created a logo. So created a business basically from scratch over the weekend, and started importing containers and selling directly on my Shopify site on all the same products you can get from Costco, just cheaper, right? And then a week later, a buyer from Wayfair, which is obviously everybody knows, Wayfair now, reached out and say, like, can I list your product or your patio furniture products on our website? And I said, sure, like, let's give it a try. That turned out to be, a really great decision, because that business grew from zero to like over $1 million in run rate in like a matter of weeks. It was so fast, and there was so much money, so quickly on just so little time that I was investing in it, that I was convinced that there's a much larger opportunity in that space. And so that was the end of 2016, beginning of 2017. That was also when Dollar Shave Club, I think, just exited for $1 billion. DTC was on the rise, right? Like Allbirds, Casper, Warby Parker, Away, all these companies are just blowing up. And I said, okay, well, the DTC business model is interesting. I think that applies really, really well in outdoor furniture. It's a $9 billion market with no recognizable brands, with really shoddy products and terrible customer experience. There must be a way to create fundamentally better products and a better experience for, to attract modern shoppers, right? Who are getting tired of the Home Depots.
What's crazy is you went from this guy who's, a gamer, wants to be in video games and design video games, to building a couple of SaaS products, to then falling in love with furniture. I mean, how the hell does that happen? I mean, how do you so quickly, wire your brain to go from this engineer to a D2C furniture seller? Like, I mean, like, how does that work? I mean, you completely changed it up. Like, you completely changed careers. I mean, what was that even like?
I guess from the outsider point of view, it is a drastic, change of career. But in my mind, it all kind of connected, because one, I'm just attracted to unsexy problems, if that's a way to say it. Like, if you think about like small businesses, like helping restaurants modernize, I mean, that's, unsexy. It's really difficult. It's not a lot of
pretty sexy now if you're DoorDash and Uber Eats and whatnot. But yeah, I feel you.
It's all about timing too. That's another lesson, right? I remember working with DoorDash when they were first starting out. They were one of our clients at ProsperWise. So I think in my mind, it all makes sense. I mean, in furniture, it's also another industry where there's no innovation, right? Like on the product side, on the experience side, it's all about design, right? Like it's all about what goes into the next season of Lookbook, but it doesn't go much beyond that. And so, from the material, from the design, the actual functionality, the material, the customer experience, the customer journey, how people shop for home goods, outdoor furniture especially, it's a very niche field in furniture, but there's no innovation that happened, for I think 40 years. And so That's what attracted me. And another thing I realized is that I really like to take advantage of all the resources that I do have. Right? It's about like making do with what you have. And so in this case, I had the factory relationship. I knew I had a at least some advantage in starting something like this. In my previous business case, it's my mom's restaurant, so that's a perfect testing bed, right? So with those two components, I guess that was the common thread of like how I want to build my companies and how what motivates me to do these things.
And so from the outset, did you like set out to create a brand, or did you want to create more so like a platform? What was like the early vision?
Yeah. So not to confuse the first business that was a Wayfair, like a kind of like a that wasn't really a brand. It was just a cash flow business. Actually, still it's operating today. It's just like autopilot. It's just a really nice business. It's cash flow, lifestyle business. For Outer, I knew I wanted to build a brand because I researched the market. There's no recognizable brand. It's level playing field with the bigger guys. I think it's ultimately for the consumer experience, it's important to have a brand that really focuses on just outdoor living, just outdoor furniture, not just the platform, not just the furniture brand that happens to have outdoor products, right? But you have to work on everything else as well. I don't think that's the way to do it. So from the very get go, I knew I wanted to build a brand, and the whole thing solidified when so basically I didn't know how to build a brand, right? I was in the B2B enterprise world and I was a computer engineer. And so like, I didn't know anything about marketing or brand building or furniture. in this case, I don't know anything about furniture. And so I reached out to, my initial thought was like, I needed to reach out to the executives at Casper, at Dollar Shave Club, at all these DTC brands and just learn from them, maybe get them to advise me or invest me or whatever. So I reached out to pretty much all the executives at Casper at the time. And one of them was Terry Lin. He was the VP of product management. He responded like a few minutes after I sent him a LinkedIn message. Nobody replies to a LinkedIn message, but he did. And I basically said, Terry, I want to build the Casper for outdoor furniture. I have a family factory, we'll love to chat. He responded, and turns out he was the former head furniture designer at Pottery Barn. And so I'm like, wow, this is like the perfect person. And then he also, is IDEO trained, right? Like customer centric design and it's problem solving, not just about designing, beautiful products, but functional and customer centric. And so like, here it is, here he is, the perfect co-founder sitting right in front of me. But I didn't know that, I was able to get him on board, to do this crazy thing with me. So I flew up to San Francisco, got to know him, and turns out he also wants to, he also see the same opportunity in outdoor. And we also share a lot of same values, like wanted to build a sustainable brand that's inspired by Patagonia, so like using eco-friendly materials and all of that. And so we just clicked really quickly. And then by the end of 2017, we decided to join forces to co-found Outer. And on just an idea, and I guess, the factory relationship and Terry, some of my previous investors in ProspectWise, invested basically right away, and so that's how we got started.
For a business like this, like any sort of product business or startup, you a lot of companies reach a point very early on where you need to raise a bunch of money to go out and produce the product actually. And so because if you have a lot of demand, then you want to obviously service that demand. And
Sure.
It sounds like you had this family factory in China. I'm not sure, did they have like inventory sitting around? Like how did that work? Because you mentioned getting the whole Wayfair deal and getting to $1 million run rate in a few weeks. Was that without any funding, and did you have to raise funding at some point?
That's right. So for Outer, I actually raised the money first and then started developing. But that's because I had the learning from that cash flow business. Because by starting the cash flow business, I remember the first ad that I ever put on wasn't on Craigslist. I just posted a picture of a wicker sofa and just to test the market demand, right? So I didn't fund that. So it was all basically bootstrapped. And then I was able to bootstrap the business to millions of dollars in run rate. And so I knew there's a market for a product like this. And I knew what are the shortcomings on the product, right? People were complaining about how difficult it is to keep their furniture clean outside, how easy the things deteriorate, the fabric's just not comfortable, like you name it, right? So I knew there's demand. I knew there were problems. I knew the experience was terrible. And so that was kind of like my crash course of just learning about patio furniture and that market in general. So that's why when I went to my investors for Outer, it was an idea, but it was a fleshed out idea. I told them that I had a supply chain. I had uncovered all these market opportunities and problems, and I had this partner with me who was willing to join me full time, right? If we can get this round of funding, and so in a way, we did a lot of customer development testing, but the way that we started Outer was that we didn't want to just take anything that's available and like off the factory floor and just like repackage it, spin up a like nice looking site and start like just burning money on Facebook and Instagram. That's how a lot of DTC brands were launched. Even in 2017, 2018, that's no longer a viable playbook, in my opinion. So, to me and Terry, I think we both think it's important to truthfully redesign the product from the ground up, like literally down to every screw, and like what is the fabric, how's the construction, how do we solve this? We call it the wet bottom syndrome, which is like when you are sitting down at a outdoor sofa, it's usually damp or wet. Even in LA, like, because in the morning there's morning dew and everything. How do you solve for that without using like a huge unsightly rain tarp or carrying the cushions in and out? Those are the problems that were reflected when I was building the previous company on Wayfair. And so we knew we had to solve all of those problems when it comes to the product before we even thought about building a brand or a website. It came down to the product first approach.
Jake, I want to play devil's advocate here for a second. There's a lot of people that have a lot of ideas, right? I mean, we've had thousands of ideas. I know people that have thousands of ideas. There's billions, trillions of ideas every day. But it takes, just kind of executing it to make it happen. However, do you think, and this is where the devil's advocate part comes in, do you think that because you had relationships with investors, because you had done this before, that you had the trust of investors to invest in anything you did, right? Whether it was outdoor furniture, whether it was underwear, whether it was, I don't know, garage doors, whatever it may be, and that somebody else, a random person with no experience, comes in and says, I want to build an outdoor furniture brand, would they have the same opportunity as you? And again, this isn't a knock on you. For sure, what you did was fantastic, and building those relationships are great, and that's what people should focus on. But can anybody else do that? Just out of nowhere, out of scratch, decide I'm going to start an outdoor furniture brand, get money for it, and get it going?
So I guess there are two answers to that. One is specifically to outdoor furniture. The barrier to entry is quite high. There are hundreds of furniture factories and studios in LA. None of them can actually create outdoor furniture. The reason is because the supply chain is completely different. Like, for example, you can't use any organic materials in outdoor furniture. You can't use cotton, wood, things that are usually available for any furniture products. You have to use synthetic, so plastic, metal, etc. So the supply chain, the barrier to entry is relatively high compared to other products. So that's it's literally to answer that question. But the second answer is that can anybody just? I definitely had the benefit of having known these investors and the resource of the factory and all of that, but I don't think it would have been possible for me to build Outer as my first business if I hadn't failed before, right? Because through that failure, I was able to show my investors that what kind of person or what kind of founder I am. Even though I didn't generate a huge return for my first investors, my first business, but they knew that I wouldn't give up and I wouldn't let just like, I could have just left the business and just say, okay, I'll just go work at Google, or go to Riot or whatever, right? Like, they knew that I wanted to stick around and, just on the premise of getting the money back. And so I think that was important to build a trust from that relationship. So I guess for, any first time founder, whether it's outdoor furniture or indoor furniture, whatever the product is or software, I think it's more important to just cultivate those relationships and just to kind of develop your skill set as a founder. I think that's what I did at ProspectWise. Building the reputation, building the skill set, all of those things that you just can't get anywhere else but to found a company. And so I guess to that degree, anybody can start outdoor furniture, but anybody can start any kind of business. But I think the primary motivation should be to learn to be a better founder, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does.
Yeah.
You mentioned the early traction, but I'm curious, and I know like in this past 6 months to a year, you guys have had insane growth because of obviously COVID and people are more home and wanting to furnish their homes indoors and outdoors. I'm sure that's been a big reason for it, which we'll talk about. But I'm curious what the sort of growth was before all this happened, and how has it been since?
Yeah. So we had two options when we launched Outer. One was to just, like go crazy with marketing and just to acquire customers and try to build a brand that way. But because of the type of the product that we're selling, so for example, we're in LA, right? So the furniture could performs differently in an LA backyard versus a New York backyard versus Miami and Seattle because of the weather. It's outside. We don't have control over where people put the sofa. So we actually launched in the end of spring last year, 2019. I think it was May when we officially launched. We knew we didn't want to, pour gas on the fire because we wanted to get true customer feedback. So I remember talking to many customers in the beginning, visiting them in person if I could in LA, and just get on the phone with them if I can, if they're elsewhere in the country. But I definitely wanted to get real customer feedback. And so that's what we focused on for the first 7 months, from May to December of 2019. We really focused on getting the product right. I think what I was telling the team was that we need to shake the hands of like 100 customers before we even think about getting 1,000 or 10,000 people to buy our product. And so that's what we focused on. But it wasn't really focused on marketing in the sense that scaling it. It was more a lot of like experimentation and testing, like seeing different channels and different messaging and copy and content, then what resonates and what can we do to acquire customers profitably. That was really our impetus. So come January, that's when we felt really comfortable because we knew that we had a really solid product. We had close to 100 net promoter score, which is super rare for any product, let alone outdoor furniture, something that people always have a complaint on. And so we knew we had the kind of like the perfect outdoor sofa was what we are promising our customers. And it seems like we're delivering on that front. So we're good on the product side, which, because of Terry's experience and, our manufacturing experience, that I guess is not a huge surprise looking back. But we want to make sure that's the case. And so in January, we felt really comfortable in doubling down. We hit product market fit. And so we had this really great marketing growth plan that, was starting to pan out in January and February. And that's when COVID hit. It was like by the end of February and March. So that was definitely luck, right? We were already we were already pouring gas on the fire. And now you have like, I guess, an oil drum of gas, pouring on the fire, just to use that analogy. But that really made kind of like double down on our growth. It's just the market in general was helping us. So it was the tailwind that doubled with our focus on growing that really propelled us to this level of growth. So we grew from it was like maybe like not even quite $1 million in annual run rate to well over $20 million in annual run rate in a matter of months. And that was just super exciting.
We talked about a little bit earlier that most companies, almost every company these days should sort of operate like a technology company because it's just everything is being techified. And so it's interesting because I think I saw on the website that you have the product and then I think you have this like showroom platform, right?
Mm-hmm.
Talk to us about that and what you're doing there.
Yeah, again, it's just a problem that we're trying to solve in the beginning. Just like the wet bottom syndrome for the sofa or the outdoor furniture itself, the physical product, the experience for shopping for outdoor furniture was also broken, right? Like if you shop for outdoor furniture today as an average, consumer, you either go to Costco, right, Home Depot, to look at what we like to call disposable furniture, right? But you're in this like big box, building that's indoor. Sometimes you don't even get to see the product. Or you're going to online, like destination like Wayfair, where there are a lot of options, but you don't ever get to see, touch, and feel, right? Or you're going to like a furniture store, a local furniture store, where it's like a close claustrophobic environment. It's it's inside, fluorescent light lit, and you're faced with this pushy salesperson. And so like, how are you going to get a good sense of whether the outdoor furniture is going to perform outside, in any of those conditions? And so our problem to solve for was like, how do we actually build these authentic showrooms? And the idea was just, it was inspired by Airbnb. Can we actually showcase our sofa in people's backyards? Are people crazy enough to do that even? I still remember the first ad on Facebook. It was just like, hey, who's actually, no, we did it on Nextdoor first. If you guys know, like the neighborhood social media platform. I was literally posting a
Mhm.
post like, hey, I'm starting this outdoor furniture company. Anybody interested in just like getting a free set of sofa just so you can like host our visits? And I didn't think people would take to that. And we got like 30 comments in like a matter of a night, right? Like, so I knew there was something, and then that turned into a Facebook ad that got 400 applications within like a month of people just wanting to do this. And so I was like, okay, all right, people are crazy enough to do this. We didn't have to give out free sofa. We probably just give them like a discount, and that slowly evolved into this neighborhood showroom platform today, where we're currently in 120 locations, actually 140 locations in over 85 cities, and it's in backyards and rooftops and balconies. And people really enjoy doing it. I mean, they do it because they get to meet like-minded people, their neighbors, strangers sometimes. They get to show off their beautiful backyard in a lot of cases, to be honest. And they really just love the product. They love what we stand for as a company, to basically, make outdoor living more enjoyable and sustainable. And so we have this group of super customers, we call them hosts, who we have like a private network for to interact with and to get product feedback on. It's great. It's a great community that we're building, and we're on track to become the largest crowdsourced showroom platform in America in the next 12 months by activating 1,000 showrooms across the country, not just in people's backyards, but in coffee shops and hotels and you name it, public spaces. So it's been super, super exciting for us.
Jake, I need some outdoor furniture myself, so hopefully, I could become a part of that group now that I have a balcony. And it's so hard to shop for this stuff. Seriously, I mean, like, you look for stuff, and I mean, first of all, you don't recognize any of the brands, so you don't really trust any brands. And secondly, you just don't know how it feels because you can't sit on it until it arrives. So, I think what you're doing is awesome. I'm curious, you're still a super young guy. I mean, this company is brand new, right? It's as newborn as your baby is. And it's as infant as your baby is. Where do you see this company going? I mean, do you see yourself doing this for the rest of your life? Is this something that you're planning on building and selling to a bigger conglomerate that deals with furniture? I mean, talk to us a little bit about your plans. I know it may be premature to ask this question, but I'm curious. And of course, we'd love to follow up with you in the coming years, but we just want to know where your head's at.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. So in my and Terry's minds, there's a very clear goal. There's a very clear milestone of creating the number one outdoor living brand in the world. And we think there is a huge untapped demand. It's a huge rising trend, even before COVID. But after COVID, it's doubly, triply so, right? I think there's just a huge demand for. I mean, like, if you walk down Main Street in Santa Monica, all the restaurants, I mean, they're all only doing outdoor dining now, right? All the office spaces are touting their communal like outdoor spaces, and everybody. I read the report the other day that says, first of all, millennials have become the largest home buying group in America, and there's a report that says the average millennial home buyer is willing to give up a single bedroom to have a little bit of outdoor space. So the market is there, right? The demand is there. I think we have the pieces in place to create the best products to kind of fulfill that kind of lifestyle. And a company that I look up to besides Patagonia, which is in its sustainability mission and its in its like eco-friendliness mission. Another company that I really like is Lululemon, right? I think when Chip Wilson, he built Lululemon in I think the late 90s. I remember correctly.
Athleisure was his episode on our podcast as well. you have a list of episodes.
You interviewed all my favorite people.
Everything is connecting all at once.
Everything's connecting. That's small world. That's awesome. I'm gonna definitely listen to that one. So his and Jeff's, right? Yep. And Mark's actually, my former boss.
Both of them.
Okay, yeah, awesome. So when Chip Wilson started Lululemon, I mean he was selling a pair of expensive yoga pants, right? Like people would call him crazy, I'm sure. Like, why would you even spend $100 on a pair of yoga pants while you can get something that's much cheaper, right? But what he saw, I think, it was just the rising trend of yoga and like the wellness movement, and in general. And so Lululemon was able to kind of ride that wave, right? Because it was a lifestyle change, it was a paradigm shift in the world and consumer behavior. And so I'm seeing the same thing. We are seeing the same thing in outdoor living. Like outdoor living, outdoor furniture exists, just like yoga pants did exist, I'm sure, back when, and athleisure existed somehow in some shape or form. But there wasn't anybody that's taking on the banner and like creating a brand for that kind of lifestyle, right? So I see the same opportunity here for Outer to carry that banner and to create the first authentic brand for outdoor living. And I think that's easily $1 billion opportunity, if not more. So I don't see ourselves selling to another furniture conglomerate. We don't even actually, as weird as it sounds, we don't even see ourselves as like a furniture company, because we'll never probably go into indoor, for example. We'll be creating some really fun products for the outside. It's all about how do you elevate your outdoor living, outdoor lifestyle, right? We will come out
Yeah.
with hammocks and other fun yard games and stuff like that before we will even consider coming out with like a living room sofa, for example.
Yeah. You guys just created some like fun outdoor games. Like we don't have enough of those.
We need
It's
them.
interesting because like we talk about this whole like concept of just brand and brand affinity and people just sort of being attached to brands. And in like the last like 5 to 7 years, we had seen like companies come out that were brandless and like they were just sort of platforms where there was just like brandless products that perhaps people could sell, or the companies were selling themselves. But we're seeing that shift back to like brand now, because it's so important, and I'm sure like you've seen it firsthand,
That's
to
right.
create a strong brand, especially in like these unsexy industries that haven't been touched for like years and years. It's incredible, and I think like it's so important, um, you know, for people to feel like they connect with something, whether it's outdoor furniture, whether it's anything that's part of your daily life. It's so important.
Yeah, I love the way that you put it. People just like to connect. They feel like they're connecting to a brand, and that goes beyond the brand, the product, right? It's a community, it's a lifestyle, it's a something that you're buying into. That's much more than that. It's almost like a religion in some cases, in a weird way. I think it's great that modern brands are popping up with very strong mission behind them. I think in the past, right, like in the kind of like our parents' generation, the baby boomer generation, the brand is all about like quality, right? Like then you're buying from a great brand because you like buying from a brand because they have great products that will last, that whatever the case may be. But I think that the modern shopper who are looking for modern brands that have a clear mission, like why do they exist, right? Are they here to to support the environmental causes? Are they here to support women rights? Are they here to support whatever the cause may be, poverty, like lifting people out of poverty? I think that's what's the hallmark of modern brands, and that's what gets me really excited. It's just like the modern shoppers really do care about that, and they will put money behind those missions. That's really exciting.
Jake, I'm curious. When I think about a product and company like Outer, and I kind of alluded to it. It's one of those things that you almost want to try out, right? It's hard to get a product and then return it. I'm sure it happens often, but unlike clothing, it's a little bit of a bulkier item, right? And you got to sit on it, enjoy it. You want to see how it looks in your space. Do you see yourself and Outer going more to almost this experiential retail model on top of the existing online business, so that people, when they're shopping, once COVID is done and all that stuff, that they can go in, test your product out, and then order it, right? Like Warby Parker model. They can test the glasses and they can order it, but they can't walk
Great
away
question.
with it. Is that
Yeah.
is that something that is in the works?
So first disclaimer is that thankfully we have less than 0.2% return rate. So again, like
Amazing.
to Terry's, magic, like we've created an amazing product that people love. And so, but to answer your question, for this future of shopping, so to speak, we have a pretty strong point of view, which is we think retail has to change, right? We don't think physical retail is dead, because we're still physical beings. I mean, we still have to see, touch, and feel a lot of products before we buy, including furniture, and I'm sure a lot of other products too. And so, but do we want to drive a car to a mall and like talk to a pushy salesperson? I think that will change for sure. It's already changing. I think for brands like us, we definitely have like low hanging fruit, which is targeting people online, right? Digital natives, people who feel comfortable buying. Look, we have a very high average order value. It's $5,000. Our product's not cheap, and to buy something like this even 10 years ago on the internet is like unthought of, right? But now people buying Tesla online, sight unseen. It's like 100 grand, right? And so it's definitely a trend, and I think it's a great trend, because it's just more efficient, right? And so, I mean, but the truth is, even after COVID, the online shopper penetration is only like about 17%. Before COVID, I think is like 11%, and after COVID, I think e-commerce like 17 or 20%. I don't remember the latest numbers, but it's definitely accelerating really quickly. It's like 5 years of acceleration in e-commerce in like a matter of months, right? It's what China
Right.
has gone through during the SARS era, and so um, even at 20%, even at 30% penetration rate for e-commerce, what about the 70%, the 80% of physical, offline shoppers? So the way that we're thinking about that is that's why we're building our neighborhood showrooms, right? That's why we have this goal of getting to 1,000 locations across America, no matter if you're in LA or in Huntsville in a small town, or Whitefish, Montana, wherever. You will have a physical presence by our brand, and you will have this physical touch point that's really easily accessible for you. And so once we have that platform, I mean, we're even thinking about, we have some brands that reach out to us and say, can we actually be part of your platform, right? When people go experience Outer, can they actually test Peloton? Can they actually try other products when they're there? And so we're pretty excited about that. That could be, the next generation of retail.
Love it.
Yeah, it's gonna be super exciting to see. I mean, like just overall, what's happening with retail, with shopping, with just like the way people interact with these brands and these products. It's just like everything's changing, and I'm for one, I'm very excited about it because I think that we, like you said, needed this, and it's just sort of accelerated that. And I think so many opportunities are going to pop out of that as well. And so entrepreneurs who are listening, people who like want to create something, I think there's so many opportunities that are out there now and will come because of this. But yeah, we're super grateful that you came on the show and shared your story and what you guys are working on. It's incredible. And if you guys ever create outdoor furniture that's resistant to wind, please let me know, because where I live on the outskirts of the valley here, and some of this outdoor furniture is in the pool or in the neighbor's yard if you don't get ahead of it. So keep me posted.
It's believe it or not, that's one of the most common things that we get, and especially from our buyers in Miami and Florida where they have hurricane season, right? So it's also one of the things that we've solved for. So love to show you the product in person soon.
Hell yeah, man. Well, thanks so much. This has been great.
Awesome, Jake.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, and best of luck on your journey. I know, during this COVID times, you guys have been killing it, but I know beyond that, clearly you built a resiliency that a lot of other people and a lot of other founders haven't experienced yet, even if they're successful first-time founders or not. So I think that resiliency is key. I think it's something that is a huge lesson learned from this episode. Is just, take life as it comes. You never know what's going to happen, whether it's your co-founder is trying to kick you out or whether it's a pandemic. But you just have to find a way to rise regardless. And I think you've done an excellent job at that. And, it's no surprise that Outer has reached the level of success it has this quickly. And we're excited to watch it, and we're excited that you were on the show early on in, Outer's journey.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.